Some time ago I saw a video on YouTube in which Paul Sellers created this little dovetail layout gauge. It's really quite simple. The only tools needed are a chisel and a handsaw. So let's go through the process of how to make it. The first thing to do is to create the angle that's going to be used for the dovetail layout gauge, and in this case it's going to be a 1 7. So I measured up 7 inches and over 1 inch and connected those 2 points with a line, and that gives me the angle. Now that the angle's been established, it's just a simple matter of setting the bevel gauge to that angle. The next thing to do is make some layout lines that are 1.5 inches in from the ends of the material. The first line will be a 90-degree line that goes across the face of the material. Now, using the bevel gauge, which has been set to a 1 7 angle, strike a second line across the face of the material. As you can see here, I had to adjust my measurement just a tad. When you're finished, you should have one 90-degree line and one 8-degree line. After I completed the layout on one face of the material, I transferred some lines across the edge and did the same kind of layout on the opposite face of the material. Also, in this particular picture, you can see some layout lines for what are essentially the same as a tenon. That material will be removed with a handsaw later. Here are just a couple of pictures that show the layout lines that I created on the other face of the material and the other edge. It's also a good idea to transfer your lines across the ends of your material. That way you have a visual reference for your saw. Now that the layout is complete, it's time to start removing some material. Here I'm using a handsaw to remove the quote-unquote cheek material. Here are the results after I created my 2 cheek cuts on one end. Being careful not to go past my lines, I flipped the material over and made 2 similar cheek cuts on the other end. Here I'm beginning to make a knife wall that will allow my saw to track squarely and precisely as I make this next cut. As you can see from this photo, the knife wall creates a bit of a trench that the saw can follow, which allows for a much more precise cut and gives a nice crisp, clean edge. Once the knife wall has been created, you can use the handsaw to remove the excess material. Here's what I came up with after having created the rest of the knife walls and removing the rest of the excess material. It's pretty rough, but I can work with it. Now comes the tedious task of using the chisel to remove the rest of the material that was left from the hand sawing. This may take some time, so just be patient. After a bit of time using the chisel to work down to my knife lines, my marks, I was able to get it to a point where I thought it was pretty good, and here it is being used to lay out the dovetails. This is just a picture of using the dovetail guide to mark lines across the end grain. So all in all, I'm pretty pleased with the way this little dovetail guide turned out. For being my first time making one with hand tools, I think I did okay. I'm going to try to make one using some power tools. I'm going to make another video of that and probably show the process, but at any rate, I hope that this will inspire you to make one of these on your own. Again, I would probably watch Paul Sellers' video before I tried to make one myself. It might make it a little bit easier for you. I know it certainly did for me because he explained some things that I wouldn't have known otherwise. So I appreciate you taking the time to watch. We'll see you next time.